All Pune team. I welcome all our YouTube audience as well as the Zoom audience to the 8th episode of our Gita Essence series. And the title of the episode is Death, the Final Call. So in today's episode, Prabhuji is going to address some of the very basic questions which we have, like what exactly death is and how we can deal this such a grinning situation of our life. And if you look at this episode 8 is based on the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which also helps us to understand how we can attain the Supreme. So although it looks so sad and very bad kind of situation, oh, we are talking about the death, but this can also be a golden opportunity. So yesterday's session, Prabhuji talked about Show Me God, which was based on the knowledge of the Absolute, chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita, where we understood through the acronym of HEAD, which was HEAD. H stands for hearing about the Krishna, to understand that how Krishna is the supreme truth, the supreme cause and sustaining force of everything, whether it's a material or spiritual. Then E stands for everywhere, and we understood through different cause and effect kinds of examples which Prabhuji portrayed. Then A was accept or reject. And we could understand that who are going to accept the Krishna or the supremacy of Krishna and who are going to reject it. And it was very beautifully explained through the analogy of those 7 sons. So I hope all of you remember that 7 sons story, that who were those 4 sons who are going to be reject Lord as the Supreme Lord, and who were those 4 sons who are going to accept the Krishna as Supreme Personality of Godhead. It was mentioned by Prabhuji that advanced souls surrender unto him in devotion, whereas impious souls divert their minds to other objectives of worship. And then the last letter was D. D was about the demigod worship. So how other minds divert to demigod worship, whereas the pious soul approaches Lord directly. And there were lots of question and answers we had, and we could understand through many of those, your doubts, and what are the different clarities on those questions. So without ado, we are going to have very interesting topic today, death, the final call, how to deal such a pathetic or sad or depressing situation, and how we convert the situation into a golden opportunity to attain the Supreme. So without much ado, I welcome our speaker, His Grace Madan Sundar Prabhuji, so that he can take over the session and take us on this journey of episode 8. Over to you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyataya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we welcome all of you, all of our audience, and also the host for the program today. Thanks for joining us for this another episode of Gita Essence. Today we'll be discussing on a very important subject matter titled as Death, the Final Call. Is my sound okay?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. So before we get into this topic of death, which is something which nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to discuss, just like an ostrich, when is attacked by a predator, then she runs away, digs a hole in the ground, puts her head into the ground, and thinks the enemy doesn't exist. If you look around in the world, looks like people are living their life like an ostrich. They don't want to face the reality of life. The one day we might have to give up this body. What happens after giving up the body? Nobody has time to think about it. And why people don't want to think or talk about it? They consider that this subject to be a depressing subject. And they have a genuine reason for it. Let me give you one simple example to begin with. Imagine you have gone to watch a movie. The cineplexes in the theaters, they have a system, they have two doors on the same floor. From one door is an entry door, and the other side you have an exit door. You're lined up to enter the show, the movie, enter the hall. And from the other door, imagine when the people are coming out, among them, one of the person is your friend. He looks at you, you look at him, and you both are very happy to see each other. Of course, you cannot move out because you're about to enter, but he can definitely move. And he comes running to you, he hugs you, says, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you. Fantastic. How have you been? Oh, you have come to watch a movie. This is such a fantastic movie. This is one of the best suspense movie of this year. I'll tell you what happens. When the hero dies, it is actually the heroine who's involved in the murder and blah, blah, blah. He goes on telling you, it tells you the whole story. And what will you say? Wait a second, you just wasted my 500 rupees. I purchased this movie ticket, only to understand how the suspense builds up. You spoiled the whole suspense of the movie by telling me what was the climax. How many of you will be upset if the climax is told to you beforehand? That is the point. People don't want to know the climax of their life. This life is also like a movie where they don't want to talk about what would be the climax, which means death. They want to let it continue, enjoy the life, thinking as if it's never going to end. So just like a moviegoer would be upset and depressed knowing how the movie ended, similarly, all of us feel like, oh no, why to talk about it? Anyways, it has to end. Whenever it would end, so be it. However, Bhagavad Gita, Lord Shri Krishna, is not only focused about improving your life in the today or in the immediate future, but also how to make your life after this life also blissful and progressive, is where Lord Shri Krishna focuses along with the rest of the messages that he's giving. So therefore, in this chapter, a very, very important chapter, here Krishna is going to talk about what is death, how to face death, what happens after death. Imagine Arjuna is hearing about the subject matter on the subject of death, and Krishna tells Arjuna, the success of life is to go back to Godhead. And to go back to Godhead, you have to remember God, so that you can go back to Godhead. But obviously, Arjuna again begins to think, if I have to remember God to go back to Godhead, why do you force me to remember Duryodhan, Dushasan, while being on the battlefield and fight with them? And once again, we'll see in the chapter when Krishna talks about the subject matter of death and gives the secret of how transmigration happens, Arjuna once again raises his hand and says, all right, Lord, I am quitting. And then Lord Shri Krishna speaks a very profound statement, which is what we need to understand in our life. How, knowing the truth, we're not supposed to become depressed. Rather, the truth of life should inspire us and encourage us to move in the right direction. Right now, in the ignorance of the absolute truth, we are heading into a right direction. And when there is somebody who wants to tell you the truth, people generally close their ears saying that we don't want to hear the truth, we are fine. But that is not the meaning of this message in Bhagavad Gita while talking about the subject of death. It is not to depress you. Anyways, I guess for most of the people outside, their life is anyways depressing. What else could be made more depressing, particularly in today's times? In fact, is to help you understand what is the end point, how to face it, and what decisions should I make in my life so I face that situation properly and make my future also wonderful. So we'll take a look at some of these points, and also some very interesting subject matter will be discussed in this chapter about what is this material world where we live in. And Lord Shri Krishna will also introduce the subject matter of spiritual world. So to begin with, just quickly recap what happened yesterday when we discussed the subject of Show Me God from chapter 7, where Lord Shri Krishna said, if you want to understand God, if you want to see God, you can see God through your ears by hearing about him. Therefore, Krishna said, Arjuna, therefore I will speak to you about the absolute truth or the Supreme Lord, which means about myself. And then Lord Shri Krishna began to speak about how I am present everywhere. I am omnipresent. I am all pervasive. Bhumirapanalavayu khamanu buddhireva chahankarityamte vinna prakriti rashtada. 7th chapter, verse 4, where Krishna says, earth, water, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, all these are my energies. And not only this, there's one energy which is superior to this, that is called as spirit, Jivatma, that is you. You are also my energy, which is superior to this inferior energy, and trying to exploit this energy to become a controller of this world, which is impossible. Like this, Krishna establishes his presence all over the place, all over the world, all over the creation. And then Arjuna thought and asked, my dear Lord, if you're present everywhere, why there is a wholesale denial about your existence? And then Lord talks about, because everyone is covered by my magic spell. I do not interfere in anyone's free will. And people, according to their free will, come to my shelter, or they don't come to my shelter. Then Krishna spoke about 4 kinds of people who come, who do not come and take shelter of the Lord. Finally, Arjuna pondered that, my dear Lord, you have been speaking only about yourself. What about devatas? The Lord Shri Krishna establishes monotheistic perspective of Vedic scriptures, where there is one supreme personality of Godhead. Devatas are not competitors to the Supreme Lord, but are different limbs of the body, which are meant to serve the whole body, represented by the Supreme Lord. And that's what Krishna established, and that's how chapter 7 ends. However, at the end of chapter 7, Krishna uses certain terminologies like Brahma, Adhyatma, Karma, Adi Bhut, Adi Daiva, Adi Yagya, and Prayana Kale, at the time of death. Some of these terminologies are used by Arjuna to explain that how a person actually can take, get moksha if he understands my transcendental position. And that is what Krishna is speaking something on this regard, which Arjuna was not very clear. And then in the beginning of the 8th chapter, Arjuna requested the Lord, my dear Lord, can I have more clarification on the terminologies like Adhibhuta, Adhiyagya, Adhideva, Karma, etc. So that is how the 8th chapter, titled as Death, the Final Law. That's not the name given by or written in the Bhagavad Gita. This is, we kind of just, the theme of the message is such, so we have coined this name here. So the title, as it for itself, talks about it, the final call, which means this chapter speaks about how to transcend death and once for all return back to our eternal home, back to Godhead, back to home, spiritual world, and never to take birth again. So death, Bhagavad Gita outlines 4 such predicaments in the lives of an individual. First is birth, second is old age, second is disease, third is old age, and fourth is death. It is explained that death is an exam that nobody can skip it. Whatever may be the condition with the world outside, government cannot put stay orders on the exam of death. You cannot pass the exam of death because the government ordered Yamraji to let the citizens pass it. That doesn't happen. So death is an exam that nobody can skip it. It's an examination. Just like all intelligent mothers would advise their kids during the exam time, that child, you should sleep early, wake up early, because studying early in the hours is a good time to study. You should not watch much TV. You should not go to play outside and waste time in frivolous activity. You should prepare for the exam. Yes or no? How many mothers say like this to the child, or how many of you have heard from your mother? Please raise your hands. Those who have your camera on, they can raise their hands. Those who don't have the camera, you raise your virtual hand. So know that, All right. And those who are on YouTube, maybe they can pass a smile, whatever way you want to communicate. Hare Krishna. So, right, isn't it? The mothers who tell their son or daughter, when the exam is there, don't waste your time, don't sleep late, wake up early, and so forth. Well, if death is an exam which we ought to be attending to, that is what our Acharya is also telling us. Sleep early, get up early in the morning, attend Brahma Murta program every day from 4:30 to 4:45. Now you're supposed to study in the morning, you do mantra meditation. That is a preparation. How well you do your mantra meditation would depend on with what grade you pass your final exam. Heavenly grade, Brahman grade, Vaikuntha grade, or Yama grade. It depends on where you're sent to. So for a spiritualist, death, the end, is not a depressing thought, since his concept of life and his purpose is much broader, because he knows one who is born, death is certain, and for one who dies, rebirth is around the corner. Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 27th verse. So this very important chapter of Bhagavad Gita shares wisdom with us that equips us with the knowledge that can help us to transcend death. To begin with, let's take a look at the acronym of the chapter, where the acronym is DEAD, dead. So let's begin with the first acronym, is for where D stands for doubt, from verse number 1 to 4. So in this section, Arjuna once again opens up his discussion with Krishna with a query or with an inquiry. Another chapter, another set of questions asked by Arjuna. Very interesting. At no point of time, Krishna discourages Arjuna from asking a question. Rather, Krishna encourages Arjuna to contemplate all his answers and subsequently make his own decisions. This chapter opens with Arjuna's questions on the terminology which was used by Krishna in the previous chapter, and he asked Krishna to clarify it. So what are the questions? That I'm going to discuss very briefly. We'll keep our subject matter focused on the subject of death. So here are the 8 questions which were asked by Arjuna. What is Brahman, Adhyatma, Karma, Adhibhuta, Adhidaiva, Adhiyagya? Where, whoever he is, does he preside, means the Supreme Lord? And how can we engage in this devotional service? So, what is Brahman? That refers to living entity. What is Adhyatma? That's the nature of the living entity. Karma, we know about karma, action, reaction. Adhibhuta refers to this creation, which is ever changing. Adhidevata refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Adhiyagya is also the Supreme Personality, the master of all yagyas. And where does he reside? Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam. He resides in the heart of every living entity. So, and now the last question is, that was the last question, Prayena Kale, right? How can those engaged in devotional service can know Krishna at the time of death? So how to face death was the 8th question. After giving answers to the first 7 questions very quickly, and just one or two verses, now Krishna, the rest of the discussion is focused about how to face death or how to prepare for the final exam. So how can one attain a spiritual destination at the time of death is the subject matter for the rest of the chapter, which brings us to the second part of the acronym, where E stands for end of life, from verse number 5 to 8. So just like we said in the beginning, nobody wants to talk about this subject. I'm really not sure what's attendance. By the way, how much is attendance today? Will let us know. We'll get to know that how many people are eager to hear on this subject. Is it more or less than yesterday? What's the attendance? 98. Okay. Okay, yeah. So see, subject matter sounds depressing. We have lesser attendance than yesterday. So nobody wants to talk about this subject matter. Interestingly, we had quite a good attendance on the subject of Show Me God. They thought there'll be some visual presentation about God. So that's the point. It apparently seems depressing, particularly for those who are engaged in worldly pursuits who want to seek after or chase after their material desires, for them, this subject matter is very depressing or very frightening. They think that the movie of life would be spoiled and they don't want to discuss about it. And we have already explained for the spiritualist, it's not about depressing, but yet it's like a new chapter in his life. So here in this section, Lord Shri Krishna explains that how a person's thought at the time of death is a culmination of their consciousness and aspiration cultivated throughout life. And at that state of mind, or in that, at the time of giving up his body, whatever is the state of mind, according to it, the person guesses next body. The state of mind refers to whatever thoughts are running into the mind of an individual. According to this, the individual takes his next body or gets a new body. What thoughts would be running at the time of death for any one of us? I guess none of us have any control on it. Let me ask this simple question to you. How many of you have control on your thoughts? Anyone here who has a control on his thoughts? Yes, no? I mean, imagine none of us have a control on a thought. What thought's going to come at that point in time is beyond us. So first of all, let's see what Krishna says, what happens at the time of death, and then we'll talk about how can we change the quality of our thoughts, and also how we can ensure that we pass this final exam. So before that, let's take a look at one real life story of Mr. Prakash, whose family, particularly whose wife, used to visit our San Diego temple almost 10-15 years ago. That's a story from that time, wherein the wife was becoming devoted. She was inclined to spiritual life. Husband was not at all interested. So he will come and drop his wife and will come to pick up at the time of Sunday feast. That was a time of activity which he loved being done at the temple. So he did this like for several times. And finally, one day he got a heart attack and he was admitted in a hospital. The wife of Mr. Prakash, Mrs. Prakash, gave a frantic call to the temple president asking for his prayers to the Supreme Lord, and whenever get a chance to please visit her husband to chant and to recite Bhagavad Gita for his upliftment of consciousness and for his quick recovery. The temple president visited and came back, and after 3 days, again he got a call where the wife said, "My husband have gone into a coma. Can I request you? His situation is very critical for you to take out time every week to go and spend at least 1 hour chanting for him and reciting Bhagavad Gita." The temple president obliged. He agreed for that. And for the next 4 weeks, for the next 1 month, the man was in coma. And for the next 4 weeks, the temple president visited and spent time with him every week. Once in a week, he will go. And after 4th week, again, the wife called up the temple president and said, Prabhuji, my husband has come out of his coma. He wants to see you immediately. He doesn't want to talk to any one of us. He just wants to see you. Can you please quickly come here? He's frantically calling for you. So temple president was surprised, because prior to this, whenever husband used to bring his wife for the temple program, he would never interact with anyone. He would never speak to anyone. And today, when he was in coma and woke up out of coma, now he's remembering temple president. Dal mein kuch kala hai. There is, isn't it? You all agree? There must be something suspicious going on. So this time, the temple president went. The nurse was standing, the family was standing, and the man was lying on the bed. As soon as the temple president entered, the man literally leaped from his hospital bed, and he jumped and he quickly got hold of the hands of the temple president. Prabhuji, 4 times they came, 4 times. So, I mean, what do you expect? Suddenly something happened like this. Temple president said, yes, I did came 4 times. No, Prabhuji, they came 4 times. The wife said, we didn't came 4 times. We were here only. What are you talking? Your son, daughter, we were here all through the time. No, they came 4 times. Then the nurse who was standing there, the nurse said, actually, your husband literally died 4 times. We saved him from the face of death. And then again he pleaded, Prabhuji, please understand, they came 4 times. So now the temple president, his name is Badrinaran Prabhu, now he's a sannyasi, Badrinaran Maharaj. He began to reflect on who came. So he said, were these forms who came to meet you, were they effulgent, very beautiful and charming personalities? The man said, no, Prabhuji, no. Now, there are two kinds of people who can come to meet you at the time of death. One with the very brilliant features, with a nice, beautiful crown, beautiful garland around their neck, and a yellow color dhoti. They are Vishnu Dutas. It's good for you, for me, if in case they come. That means exam is successful. You passed the exam. In case, if by 1 or 2 marks we flunk, even by 1 or 2 marks, then there are other category of characters who come to face us, not to face us, to meet us. And with Mr. Prakash, that's what happened. Now Bhadripu asked, what were these other kind of people? So this man said, this kind of person, there were three men were there, ugly looking, ghastly, disfigured people. Their eyes were red shot. They were holding chains in their hand. They had hairs coming from every part of their body. They were looking so ugly and frightening. They had a big tongue. They were licking their mouth again and again as they want to devour me. Then Badrinath Prabhu said, oh, you mean the Yamdutas? Yes, Prabhuji, they came to take me. And when they were about to take me away, I said, oh, I have fully surrendered to Krishna. Do whatever you want. I guess this is the impact of Krishna Prasadam. He took Krishna Prasadam so he could remember Krishna. So he said, Prabhuji, as soon as I took the name of Krishna, they disappeared. Because the memory of Ajamil Kand was fresh in their mind. So they didn't want to get again beaten up by Vishnu Dutas. So they immediately disappeared from there. Then he said, Prabhuji, but they again came again. When they came again, I said, Vishnu, do whatever you want. I have decided to take shelter of Vishnu. They again disappeared. Third time they again came. I said the same thing. And finally, the fourth time, the beautiful one came. The Vishnu Dutas came. And that time when the Yamdutas came, Vishnu Dutas chased them away. And suddenly I got up and came back to my senses, holding the hand of the temple president, and he said, Prabhuji, I don't want to go back home. Please take me to the temple. Now I have decided to surrender my life to Vishnu. This is one real life story. He's a pujari now in San Diego temple, by the way. If in case you ever visit to America, San Diego, if you see a temple or pujari there, you can ask him, Prabhu, are you the one who had the encounter with those Yamdutas? So just one example of a true story here, but let me talk about what happens, what Krishna says on this subject matter. Krishna says, Antakale chamamiva smaran muktva kalevaram yaprayati samadbhavam yati nasti atra samshaya. Antakale chamamiva smaran muktva kalevaram, which means at the end of life, smaran, remembering me. If somebody passes off, gives up the body, remembering me, kalevaram, giving up the body, ya prayati samadbhavam yati nasti atta samshaya. There is no doubt of it that such a person will come back to me. Smaran muktva kalevaram, madbhavam, which means the emotion. We'll talk about it. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes about the law of transmigration, how the transmigration functions. Prabhupada says, in this verse, the importance of Krishna consciousness is stressed. Anyone who quits his body in Krishna consciousness is at once transferred to the transcendental abode of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the purest of the pure. Therefore, anyone who is constantly Krishna conscious is also purest of the pure. The word smaran, remembering, is important. Remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness and devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life. If one wants to achieve success at the end of his life, the process of remembering Krishna is essential. And therefore, one should constantly and incessantly chant the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Therefore, like that, Srila Prabhupada describes, if you want to cross beyond birth, death, old age, and disease, we need to remember Krishna, and we need to cultivate remembrance of Krishna from now, and that is done through the process of chanting the holy names. Next, Krishna talks about the general law of transmigration, where he says, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tayajate yante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sadatat bhava bhavitaha. Whatever thought comes to the mind of an individual while he's quitting the body, according to that, one guesses next life. So thoughts, all of us acknowledge and understand we have no control on our thoughts. It's not easy to control our thoughts. But how thoughts are formed, that is in our control. Yes or no? Have you ever reflected how different kind of thoughts comes? For example, you've gone and watched a movie. Aren't you remembering about the hero or the heroine, whatever you saw in the movie? Let's say you watched the news, and in the news there was some violent message or violent news about some crime. Isn't that kind of thoughts running into your head? You played a violent game in which you were the policeman and you were killing terrorists. Again, those thoughts of violence are going. So how we engage our senses, how we behave, by that thoughts are created. So we may not have a control on our thoughts, but we do have a control on what thoughts will be created, which depends on our behavior, our actions. So we need to change our action, and that is called as cultural engineering. We all have done civil engineering, computer engineering, IT engineering is of no use at the end of life. But one, huh? Which engineering? Mechanical engineering. Okay. So due respect to all mechanical engineers, mechanical engineering also. Some mechanical engineers sitting here got upset. I didn't mention them. All right, all right. So what was I saying? So all this engineering is of no use at the end of life, except for one engineering that is called as cultural engineering, which means about accepting spiritual culture and spiritual life. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada in the purport to this verse says, of course, one thoughts during the course of one's life accumulate to influence one's thought at the moment of death. So this life creates one's next life, very important. If in one present life, one lives in the mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the time of death. That will help one to transfer to the transcendental abode of Lord. If one is transcendentally situated, absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be spiritual, not material. Therefore, Prabhupada says, the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare is the best process for successfully changing one's state of being at the end of one's life. And there are many examples in the history that we know of. One very famous example is of Bharat Maharaj, the great king who renounced at a very early age to become fully dedicated for the spiritual cause. However, at the end of his life, he became attached to a deer, a very beautiful drawing. If you carefully look at this drawing, at the end of quitting his body, look what's happening here. Bharat Maharaj had fallen into a ditch, and there the deer who he was remembering comes near to Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj is hugging the deer, and while of course hugging the deer is remembering the deer. And you'll see what happens. The soul of Bharat Maharaj, right above the deer, there is a portrait of a man. If you see carefully in the image, that is the soul of Bharat Maharaj getting transferred into the body of deer. That is the law of transmigration. All of you saw that? Clear? Just one simple example about it. So, how to remember Krishna? Krishna says, how to remember Krishna at death? Krishna explains, if you want to remember me, if you want to have thoughts about me at the end of life, you have to practice sadhana throughout life. What is the sadhana? Srila Prabhupada gave a very simple formula of sadhana. Sleep early, wake up early in the morning, utilize the early morning hours to remember the Lord through the process of mantra meditation. After chanting the prescribed number of rounds, doing mantra meditation, then take part in Aarti of the Lord. After attending to the Aarti, here at least for half an hour to 40 minutes, then rest of the day is for your professional and personal life. Rest of the day, but at least the morning hours should be kept for your own spiritual life. So practice sadhana, and second, live a pure life. If you do like this, live a pure life means no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex, and no meat eating. In such a way, if person lives a life, Krishna says, at death, you remember your attachments. By living a life like this, you certainly would develop attachment for me, and you would remember me at the end of life. So Arjuna thought, my dear Lord, if I have to remember you at the point of death, then why should I engage in war? I should cultivate remembrance of you. And to easy way to cultivate remembrance is go to the forest, chant your holy name. On the war, how can I chant your holy name? So better for me to quit the war, isn't it? As I said, we are always looking for ways to give up our responsibilities and prematurely take to the path of renunciation. So here, oh, 1 second. Yes. So now Krishna speaks a very, very profound statement. Krishna says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. Tasmat means therefore. Sarva, kal, at all times. Mam anusmara yutyacha. Mam anusmara. Anu, as the predecessors remembers me, means following the ways of acharyas of remembrance to me. Yudhyacha, engage in your duty. Mai arpita mano buddhe, engaging your buddhi onto me. Mame vasasya samshaya, you will attain me. Asamshaya. Samshaya means doubt. Asamshaya means without doubt. I promise you, Arjuna, if you engage your duties while continuously remembering me and cultivating knowledge about me, you will certainly come to me at the end of life. You don't have to quit or give up things. So the very important thing is what here in this verse is anusmara. Krishna could have used smaram, right? Smaran means remember. Why anusmara? Which means to remember the Lord as being prescribed, the process given in the Vedic scriptures or by the acharyas. So many times people ask, why 16 rounds? Why chant on the beads? Why this and that? So Krishna is saying anusmara. What is the process of remembrance of the Lord? As had been done by the previous acharyas. So the acharyas have given the process of remembering the Lord through chanting on the beads, chanting a prescribed number of rounds. That is a way of cultivating remembrance. Srila Prabhupada writes in a purport. Can anyone among the audience read it? If they have, it's possible. But how would everyone else hear? Oh, but the Dipasha can read, yeah. Hare Krishna. Our
Hare
host
Krishna,
would like to
Prabhuji.
read?
Yes, Prabhuji. I am audible.
Yes, please.
Srila Prabhupada's purport. This instruction to Arjuna is very important for all men engaged in material activities. The Lord does not say that one should give up his prescribed duties or engagements. One can continue them and at the same time think of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna. This will free one from material contamination and engage the mind and intelligence in Krishna. By chanting Krishna's name, one will be transferred to the supreme planet Krishna Loka, without a doubt.
So that's the point where Lord is not saying give up your duties, but rather says engage. Engage in a prescribed manner and continue on with the life. Just like before this session, we were having another session on Upanishads, where we were making a point that how many times people blame Vedic culture and Vedic scriptures for making people give up their material responsibilities and duties prematurely. We were discussing on the subject of how the Vedic culture got spoiled, or the reasons of fall down of Vedic culture and Vedic civilization. And of course, one of the reasons is where the kings became too detached prematurely from their professional responsibility of maintaining and protecting the kingdom, which led to a easy attack by the foreign invaders. Well, that's not what Vedic scripture teaches, because Arjuna also wanted to give up his duty of protecting dharma. But what did Krishna say? For you right now is to protect dharma. That is your duty. And while protecting dharma, you are engaging in my service. Not by giving up the protection of dharma, you become transcendentalist. That is not the means. So it's because of lack of proper understanding of Vedic scriptures, people had made mistakes in the past, and of course that's the reason we kind of became ruled by the foreign invaders. Those are big story subject matter, but just to give you a cue about it. Krishna says, Abhyas. So how do we do Abhyas? Krishna explains, Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanya paramam purusham divyam yathi pathanu chintayan. Who meditates on me as a supreme personality, his mind constantly engaged. Such a person is sure to reach to me. So, two things Krishna is saying how to pass the final exam. One is Anusmara, to remember, as the previous acharyas have given the process. And second is Abhyas, which we just discussed in the 8th, which means Abhyas means to follow regulated practice of cultivating spiritual knowledge and spiritual culture. And Srila Prabhupada emphasizes the importance of chanting the regulated number of lives. So that's the point about it. So as the proverb goes, all is well that ends well. And a classic example is of Bhishma Pitamaha, whose life was full of challenges and tribulations, marked by stark sacrifices. However, he had an incredible and the most glorious departure from this world, where the great sages from all over the universe had assembled by his side to witness the final exam or the departure of Bhishma Pitamaha, while Krishna was present personally in front of Bhishma Pitamaha. So this is one success story of how an individual passed the final exam and the whole world came to celebrate death. Very interesting. The whole world had assembled to celebrate death because it's a momentary shift which gives access to one for an eternal life, and actually is a joyous moment for those who pass it. Arjuna pondered. He thought, my dear Lord, how do I cultivate remembrance? Although Srila Prabhupada in his purpose have already described the process of remembrance, but Krishna in the flow of discussion will talk about the process of remembrance, where Krishna says there are two ways. First, this brings us to the third section from verse number 9 to 22, where Krishna talks initially about Sat Chakra Yoga system that you know of, Mooladhara and all that. And then Krishna talks about Bhakti Yoga. And then Krishna in this section also compares the material world with the spiritual world. So what is Satya Chakra Yoga? A practice of Satya Chakra Yoga means raising the life air to Agnya Chakra, where a person has to chant and meditate. And primarily, he has to take a path of renunciation, give up all kinds of sense pleasure, and particularly give up the sex life, live as a renunciate all alone in the forest, and try to cultivate the process of meditation. So once again, just like in 6th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna spoke about Ashtanga Yoga, just to help understand Arjuna and all of us that it is not a feasible process. So does Krishna is explaining about Satya Chakra Yoga, that it is not a doable activity in Kal Yuga. So what is the easiest process? Krishna talks about Bhakti Yoga is the easiest. And as we already discussed, Srila Prabhupada gave a very simple process for cultivating Krishna consciousness. Sleep early, wake up early in the morning, practice spiritual life, chant your rounds, attend Aarti, hear about the Lord, perform your responsibilities rest of the day. And before going off to bed, again, remember the Lord for some time, which Srila Prabhupada called as a sandwich program. So Bhakti Yoga is very simple, pure, and easy to perform, as a statement by Srila Prabhupada. Only difficulty is we have to minimize our smartphone usage and the application that are on smartphone like Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, and whatnot, probably YouTube. Cut down on your TV or internet time. This is the only austerity in Kali Yuga. Is there any other austerity? None of you have to go into the forest to perform this practice of yoga. Anyone? You don't have to give up your family life. You don't have to give up your cherished job that you love so much. Nothing you have to give up. You have to just not compromise, adjust with your waste time and utilize in Krishna's service. So ahead in this section, the glories of bhakti is being described, where it is explained that how bhakti brings peace. Now, whose life would not be peaceful if he stops watching movie and news? Yes or no? Yes or no? What does our audience says? If imagine all your time which you used to spend on watching movies and news is been replaced by reading wisdom literatures like Ramayana, Mahabharata, and is being replaced by chanting of the holiness of the Lord. How many of you agree your life would naturally become peaceful? Raise your hands. How do I know people are raising their hands? We have to use virtual. Somebody is not sure, give me a thumbs down. We can talk about it. Some alternate means to make your life peaceful. That's it. Bhakti brings peace. Bhakti cannot be checked, which means it does not depend on any material situation, time, place, circumstances. Bhakti purchases Krishna just like Arjuna. Krishna became charioteer for Arjuna. Krishna personally washed the feet of Sudama, the Brahmana. And ultimately, bhakti liberates us. So, bhakti brings peace. How? Karmi wants sense gratification. Jnani wants release from suffering, material misery. Yogi wants mystic power. But Bhakta wants to please only devotees. Sorry, I was going in a sequence of Karmi, Jnani, Yogis. I said Bhakti. I mean Bhakta. Bhakta wants only to please Krishna. That is how it brings peace. Bhakti cannot be checked. In Jnana Ashtanga Yoga, the advancement is dependent on certain qualities like knowledge, renunciation, and favorable situations. However, in Bhakti, there is only one thing which is needed, the desire to perform Bhakti. That's all, nothing else. Bhakti purchases Krishna. Ananya Bhakti. Ananya means without being added, without deviation. Satatam, continuously being performed as Sulabha. This is a verse which is being described how Bhakti purchases. This is the features of the Bhakti. Bhakti is being performed like this. Krishna becomes easily accessible. And finally, Bhakti liberates us. 14 to 16 verse are talking about the glories of Bhakti, where it becomes very easy for an individual to escape the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. It's the only path to give us moksha from this suffering situation. And after this, Lord Shri Krishna speaks about the material world and spiritual world. When Krishna is speaking about liberates us, which means if we are being liberated from current situation, there must be another situation existing, yes or no? If somebody says, we'll set you free from prison cell, what it means? There must be a world, there must be a reality existing outside of prison house, yes or no? If you are being liberated from some place, which means there is another reality. Lord Shri Krishna now talks about that other reality. Current reality is material world, and the other reality is spiritual world, which Krishna speaks now. So what is the nature of material world where we are tied up today, which Krishna wants us to become free of? Krishna explains the nature of this world in 15th verse. Mamupetya punar janma dukhalayam ashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gata. Hey Arjuna, after attaining me, living entity, Punarjanma, does not take birth again. Where? Dukh Alyam. Alyam means house. Pustakalya, which means library. Himalaya, which means the house of snow. Dukh Alya, which means the house of suffering. Dukhalyam Ashashvatam, temporary. To which place Krishna is saying Dukhalyam and Ashashvatam? Is not indicating to Pakistan or China. Okay, is indicating to the material world. Here in this verse, Krishna has rubber stamped all of our forehead that you are born in a prison house, which is called as material world, and is actually a place of suffering. Dukhalyam ashashvatam. Napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gata. Krishna further says in 8 chapter 16 verse, Brahma Bhuvana Luka Punaravartino Arjuna. From the topmost planet of Brahma to the lowest planet, Punaravartino Arjuna is a place of rebirth. Even if somebody attains to Brahma Loka, the highest planet in this creation, again he has to take birth. Mamupetya Kvanti, but one who attains to my abode, Punarjanmana Vidyate, one who attains to my abode, does not attain or does not take birth again. And that is what the meaning of liberation. Liberation means to become free from the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, Krishna says, which is happening all over the creation from Brahma Loka to the lowest planet. It's only possible when somebody comes to my abode. So why did Krishna created this Dukhalayam, such a messy place, isn't it? What are the possible things needed to design or for a well-planned city? You need an entertainment house, you need a cricket ground, or theater, public places, hospital, malls, stadiums, whatnot, everything. But there are one more thing which are needed for a well-planned city, that is a prison house, because there are always certain miscreants in the society. Yes, if you're living in any society, forget a city, even within a society, there would be some people who would always break the rules. Yes or no? They would not follow what has been decided. So there is a prison house needed. Criminal elements in society force the authorities. Hare Krishna. 1 second. Yeah. Criminal elements in society force the authorities to create prisons. Now, the purpose of prison, why we, how do we deal with the prisoner? There are two ways. We can send them behind the prison walls or prison house to reform them, or else shoot them. Shooting them is definitely not an option. Therefore, they are sent behind the prison bar. The prison house offers the basic facilities of maintenance and living, where a person is provided with the minimal, requirements for the bodily maintenance. However, imagine if the prison house was like a 7-star suite with your private dining room, living room, with 2 waiters waiting outside the door always to serve your favorite meal to all of the prisoners, then who will be out in the prison? Who will be out in the world? Everyone will be in the prison house. So nature of prison house is the Khalayam, is a place of suffering where you are actually sent to get reformed, where material world is compared to a prison house. So you're not here to enjoy life. We are here to reform our consciousness. Therefore, there is a constant suffering in this world. So what is the need of a prison house? To reform and to punish and purification. How are we given punishment? This is a universal law in the form of birth, death, old age, disease. Doesn't matter which religion we belong to. And who is the jail keeper for this prison house? Is Durga. Dur means difficult, Ga means gamana, to leave. Durga means prison house. Dur means difficult, Ga means to give. Durga means one which makes it very difficult for an individual to escape the prison house. And how does Durga Devi punishes us in the prison house? By Kalesha. 3 kinds of Kalesha which represent the 3-pointed ends of Durga Devi's Trishul. Punishment in the form of Adibhautik, Adidevik, Adhiklesha. Adibhautik, Adidevik, Adhyatmika, Klesha. So what is the need of the prison house? Punishment for the purpose of reformation and purification. What are we supposed to be purified of? Of Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mastery. Yes or no? Now my question here is, do you acknowledge and agree that this is a situation we all are in, where all of us, once in a while, we all have this kind of 6 enemies, and we are undergoing this kind of a punishment like birth, death, old age, and disease? Yes or no? However, whoever we are, from the prime minister of the topmost country in the world, America, to anyone, to a poor man on the street of Pune, everyone has a fear of COVID. Yes or no? Everyone is frightened by the pandemic. Everyone has fear of the extreme weather conditions and whatnot. And that is the point. Dukhalayam. So what happens when a person comes to the prison house? His clothes are changed. The first thing that happens is his clothes are changed. That means he is given a dress. So how are we given a dress? Shastra says there are 8.4 million species to choose from, which refers to, oh, what happened? Yes, these are the 8.4 million species. Of 9 lakh species are found in water, 20 lakh refers to non-moving trees and plants, 11 lakh refers to species of insects and reptiles, 10 lakh refers to birds, 30 lakh varieties of quadrupeds, means 4-legged animals, and 4 lakh refers to human species, which means different levels of consciousness, which include Devatas, Gandharva, Vidyadharas, and all the different living entities which are categorized within the human species. I have just quickly rushed through the subject matter because we have discussed in detail in the previous series under the topic of why do bad things happen to good people, where we introduced about the subject of material creation of the material world. So how are we tied up into this prison house? There is no prison wall. So we are in a prison wall or prison house without walls, and we are bound in this prison house by the three chains or three modes of material nature, which are called as Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamoguna. Remember 7th chapter yesterday? Krishna said, everyone is covered by these three modes of material nature, and this is how we are conditioned. That's the reason Prabhupada in English will translate Jivatma as conditioned living entity. What is conditioned? Influenced by mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. We'll discuss more about the qualities of these modes in the 14th chapter. So then Krishna ahead discusses about the nature of the spiritual world in verse number 20 and 21, wherein Krishna says, spiritual world is eternal, free from birth and death, infallible, full of unlimited bliss. It fulfills all desires. Chintamani prakara satma shukalpa vriksha lakshavrateshu surabhi abhipalayantam lakshmi sahastra shata sambhrama sevyamanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Chintamani Prakara Sadma Shukalpa Vriksha. Every grain of the soil is Chintamani, can fulfill all desires. Every tree is a Kalpa Vriksha. Lakshavrateshu Surabhi. Every cow is like a Surabhi who can fulfill all desires, is a description of the spiritual world by Brahma himself. It's all attractive, Krishna says, is unmanifested and transcendental. There is no creation and destruction. It is always as it is a supreme destination, and it is a place of no return. Attaining the spiritual world is said to be liberation. And that is what Krishna is talking about. Arjuna, all of us have a choice. After giving up this body, keep hovering in this material world from one type of prison cell to another type of prison cell. Or else you have an opportunity to break the prison cell, come out into the real world, which is called as Vaikuntha. Kuntha refers to misery. Vai means no. No Kuntha means no miseries. Come to the place of no birth, death, old age, and disease, no kleshas of any kind, no extreme weathers, no viruses, no enemies of any kind. Is a place of unlimited bliss. There is no envy, there is no anger, there is no competition, there is no greed, is what Krishna defines as spiritual world in Bhagavad Gita, which is the destination of all intelligent people. And they all aim for this particular position. So Arjuna thought, my dear Lord, for Bhakta, I understand it's easy for them to go back to Godhead, but what about Karmis and Gyanis? Krishna has now described the spiritual world and the process of reaching it. In the final 6 chapters of this, final 6 verses of this chapter, Krishna would explain the process by which a soul can leave his or her body to attain the spiritual world. And that is the last section where D stands for devotion, from verse number 23 to verse number 28. Here Lord Shri Krishna highlights various spiritual practices and concludes by outlining the most powerful and effective process to attain the supreme. Where Krishna says, Arjuna Bhakti Yoga, the path of active service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the highest and the easiest means to attain the supreme abode. Why? Because in a rampant age of distraction and temptations coupled by individual weakness and hardly any spiritual aspirations, a very, very powerful process is required that can create hope even for the hopeless individuals like us who have no aspirational desires for practicing spiritual life. And Krishna explains such a process is called as Bhakti Yoga. If one is able to saturate their consciousness with God, they will very easily attain to the supreme destination. So how to attain the supreme? Krishna says about the karmis and gyanis. For them, they have to pass the world at the right time, in the right month, in the right day, and the right time. It matters. However, for the bhaktas, for devotees, the time and situation doesn't matter because they're always under the shelter of the Supreme Lord. The essence is that we are practicing bhakti. Death is not the end of life. Death creates an opportunity to meet the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Death is not a subject matter to be frightened of. Death is a subject matter of joy where we give up the miserable state of existence and reach the eternal existence with the Supreme Lord and all the devotees of the Lord. Devotional services, Lord Shri Krishna concludes with, encompasses everything in the last verse of the 8th chapter, that is 28th verse. Simply by performing devotional service, living entity attains all the benefits of all the other processes. Thus, Krishna concludes and once again declares, Arjuna, bhakti is the best process. So with this, we come to the conclusion of this chapter where Lord Shri Krishna focuses on the question of Arjuna about how to remember Lord at the end of his life. Lord Shri Krishna speaks about the secret. How do you remember? First of all, how to face the death. Whatever we remember at the time of death is what we attain in the next destination. So, and now, how do you remember the Lord? Krishna says two things. What are the two things Krishna says? Anyone remembers? Anusmara, to remember, and abhyas. Please remember Anusmara and abhyas. To remember, as the acharyas have taught us how to remember the Lord, abhyas is to practice spiritual life and spiritual culture. If we cultivate our life like this, then eventually, and for sure, when we face this inevitable exam, we'll certainly pass this exam and become free from the prison house of the material world. And that is the gist of this topic. Tomorrow, when we meet, we'll be talking of the central chapter of the entire Bhagavad Gita, wherein we'll be speaking exclusively about Bhakti Yoga. We have introduced Bhakti Yoga, how to practice Bhakti Yoga, where Lord Shri Krishna will speak about the glories of Bhakti Yoga, and more important than that, the quality of a relationship between the devotee and the Lord. Lord has spoken about the living entity, Lord has spoken about himself, Lord has spoken about different kind of yoga practices. Lord have established the glories of Bhakti Yoga. But now Lord Krishna will go into the subject matter of the relationship between the Bhakta and Bhagwan, the nature of that relationship, wherein Lord Shri Krishna promises Arjuna, my devotee never perishes. Very, very important chapter. Krishna willing, we'll see that tomorrow when we meet again. With that, thank you once again for joining us for today evening. If in case any questions or comments are there, we can open the forum now. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for explaining this wonderful chapter. And I have one quick question from YouTube, which is a common also on Zoom. So on the Zoom, Radhika Mataji has asked that how we can overcome the fear of losing our loved ones. And similarly on the YouTube, Ashish Keshavji is also asking similar question. How we can console our relatives who are not aware of such knowledge about loss or inevitable approach death of someone, which doesn't aggravate the state of heart. So how we can console others and also how we can console ourselves in such situation when we are facing.
Thank you. Thank you. Very important question. Can I, to answer this question, give you one real life story? It's a story of a mother who had a 5-year-old son. She's from Europe, lives in Chicago, and got married to an American man. However, after their marriage, the man was also a spiritualist, but he got distracted. And he went back into his old ways of living a life as a non-devotee. And they stayed married all through. Now, her husband is not supported in her spiritual life. She didn't knew much people there because she belonged from Europe. and she didn't have any child also. So life was becoming very, very difficult for her. After long 10 years of their married life, finally they had a child. Very, very wonderful child. Very wonderful child. Please try to understand the situation of this mother. Lives in a foreign land, have no relative there, got married to a devotee who she thought is a spiritualist and could be a lifelong partner in her spiritual journey. But after her marriage, he got distracted and deviated, became completely opposite to the spiritual culture. Has nobody. Now you don't are in sync with your husband also, doesn't have a child. And after 10 long years, finally the mother gets a child. How many of you agree the child would have become the complete, total focus and object of her love and attachment? Yes or no? Because you have nobody else with whom you can share your love. Now, to whom, if you love somebody a lot, to that degree, I would say, if you have attachment to something, to that degree, we have a fear of losing that attachment. Yes or no? Now, very sincere practicing devotee, very sincere lady. And just when the son was 5 years old, and the son was so devotional, so brilliant, the son was it was a hit among the devotee community. Everyone in the devotee community loved the son. He was so sober, so nice and well-mannered boy, young boy. And when he was 5-year-old boy, he got sick with certain disease, and abruptly and suddenly, this young, very, very sweet, cute-looking boy died. When mother woke up in the morning, went into the room of the child, when the child didn't woke up, the whole world came collapsing onto her. She was devastated. And the news spread in the whole community. The whole community was devastated, thinking that how much she has already suffered. Finally, the Lord fulfilled her desire. And only within short 5 years, her son, who was the object of her love, was taken away. What will happen? People began to imagine different situations that could possibly happen for her. Finally, the day of, when you have crematorium, the day, I mean, of course, the next day, when you have to burn the body of a child, everyone came prepared with a properly planned script, or a script which they thought they will speak to the mother to pacify her heart. They all were filled with tears when they came to such a situation, to see the 5-year-old boy who was cherished and loved by everyone in the community, his young, tender body now will be burnt to ashes. And to everyone's amazement, they all came back inspired. They went to console the mother, but the mother consoled everyone else. Now, what gave strength to the mother? You know what mother said? She said, yes, I'm sorry. I feel pain to what happened to me, but I'm also very joyful. Because knowing my son's devotional qualities, I'm very sure that my son's this lifetime was a final life. And he just had few years more to live in this material world. And he has completed his duration and he has gone back to Krishna. What can be a more glorious position for me than to have a son who was so devotional, loved by the devotee community, where everyone prayed for his well-being, and finally he passed away, where he received the mercy of everyone, is actually a blessing of Lord Shri Krishna on me, where he chose me to become a mother of such an elevated child. I am not sorry, I am proud, I'm happy and fortunate, where Lord Shri Krishna gave me an opportunity for this service to render on his behalf to this living entity. If you loved her response, give her a big round of applause. At your respective place you can give. She inspired the heart of everyone. Everyone went with the tears, came back with a smile, because nobody thought the perspective she had. Nobody thought of it. From where did she got the strength? The strength came from her Krishna consciousness. From where did she got the knowledge? The knowledge came from her sincere practice. We have to practice spiritual culture. We have to build our relationship with the Lord through the means of chanting. That is the only way we can transcend the temporary inconveniences that comes in our life. Otherwise, without having a clear vision, will get into a trouble. So that is answer to the first question. Second question, how do we console relatives? To them, you should always speak about the subject matter of body and soul. How a living entity is more than a body. There is a spirit soul. Spirit soul never dies. And that is what you have to speak to them and tell them it's an eternal position. It keeps going on from one family to another family. The person who you think is no more has actually just moved to another destination. And the subject matter of Atma pacifies time and again. The subject matter brings hope to those who think they have lost the living entity forever. But it's not the case like that. All right. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Now I request Poonamji. Poonamji, you may unmute yourself and ask a question. Yes, Poonamji.
My question, I have two questions. First is related to the episode 4, which I missed. So I watched today on the YouTube, wherein you mentioned Bhagavad Gita being published by different author does not have the correct information, whatever Krishna spoke to Arjuna. So can you recommend any author whose book we should refer?
I had discussed about that in that episode itself, where I spoke about the Bhagavad Gita. The message of Bhagavad Gita has a potential to transform the consciousness of the whole world. And that was done by the writing of Srila Prabhupada, wherein he brought about a spiritual revolution in the consciousness of the people all over the world at a very advanced age of 70, where he started his preaching mission. In less than 12 years, he opened 108 temples, traveled all over the world more than 13 times. At such an advanced stage to do like this, translated more than 16 volumes of Vedic scriptures, is not a small job. And made hundreds and thousands of people give up their sinful ways of living and accept a life in mode of goodness. So the result is the proof of the efficacy and the potency of the writings of Srila Prabhupada, which means is representing the message of the Lord as it is. Similarly, when Arjuna heard from Krishna, his hopelessness was transformed into hope. Similarly, when we read the writing of Prabhupada, which is nothing but the words of Krishna, but tailor-made into our understanding, being put into a language which we can understand, English, Hindi, Marathi, etc. Because when we read the instructions of Krishna as it is through the means of Srila Prabhupada, our heart is transformed. Hare Krishna.
So thanks, Prabhuji. Another question is rebirth happens based on the previous birth karma. Okay. Then when does the soul take first birth? What would be the form of that soul?
Well, that is a question which is beyond the subject matter of discussion, not even elaborated in scriptures, because what time when a living entity first came is beyond comprehension. When you're talking about on the time scale of eternity, your birth also happened somewhere in eternity. How can we describe the situation of eternity? Why it happened is described. Why we came down from spiritual world to the material world is because a living entity developed a desire to enjoy separately, became somewhat attracted to the material energy of the Lord, and Lord gave the freedom. All right, you can go ahead and experience this world. You want to take my position of being the supreme controller, proprietor, and enjoyer? I create a place for you where you can try to experience that situation of supreme controller, proprietor, enjoyer. Tell me about it. Is not that what everyone is trying to do? Everyone is trying to become a controller, proprietor, enjoyer, yes or no? Even a pauper on the street is proud of his penny. That's the point. That's the nature of every living entity. So Lord says, so be it. You come and do that. But Lord is so kind and compassionate. He doesn't send us alone here. He comes along with us as Paramatma and continues to live along with us life after life, accompanying us, because we are so dependent, we cannot function if the Lord is not there. Actually, our situation is like a small child. If he or she has to walk, can only walk when holding the finger of the Father. Because all our desires ultimately get fulfilled by the Supreme Lord only. So that's the point. So I would recommend strongly, along with getting answers to philosophical queries, we have to also follow the spiritual culture. Take to the practice of mantra meditation. It is so potent and powerful that it itself would begin to answer doubts that you have. Without taking to the spiritual culture, spiritual inquiry alone would not help. Spiritual inquiry is meant to inspire to take to spiritual culture. So all your questions that you ask is supposed to inspire you, if you get an answer, to take to spiritual culture. So kindly take to the process of chanting. That is what my request would be. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, next we have Neerajji. Neerajji, you are requested to unmute yourself. Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. So, Prabhuji, I have two questions.
Can we go one by one so I can take questions of everyone? So we'll go one by one this time. You can ask Neeraj what is the most important question for you right now. Then when we run in the circle with everyone, if time permits, we'll come back to you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Neeraj.
Right. So my question is in regard to death. So, so people commit suicide, right? And I've heard in some videos that they become ghost or bhoot pret, right? And they have to stay in that condition until they complete their expiry age, right? And it feels like what actually they have done wrong in the past life that had made them to take this decision in their current life.
Well, there could be many reasons. There could be many reasons for that. Ultimately, free will is what we have. If we misuse the free will, that is what we are served to. It is your choice to be right now attending the program or playing Pogo or something, whatever is the game, So, it's an individual choice. You are here, similarly, your friends may be watching a movie. So what choices we make, accordingly, our destiny is created. That's the point. Now, what are the reasons that leads you to make a choice and all that? They're again dependent on your free will. In other words, what you did in the past would create an environment and a situation for you. You're getting a point now? For example, if you were taking an association of smokers 3 years before, you've created a situation around for you where you have to smoke a cigarette every day, even in their association, without their association. Now, have you created the situation around for you? Yes or no? Got the point now? So what and how we have associated or made a choices before, they actually created a situation for us today. But today you have a choice to further create the situation for you or not. To smoke or not smoke. If you decide not to smoke, you change your situation for you. So somebody making a decision to commit suicide could be influenced by the previous past actions, but it is not that you don't have the right to choose today. But because people live their life ordinarily in the Rajoguna and Tamoguna particularly, which is compared to animalistic platform, where they function based on instincts. What I feel is what I do. They don't have a free will to choose also. That is what happens to those who are engaged in sinful life. They think I am having a life of freedom actually. When you talk about people talking on the street about man and woman equality, sometimes women come on the street, we are also equal to men and all that, or vice versa, whatever is the situation. When people talk about freedom of rights, freedom of speech and everything, they may talk about freedom, but if they're breaking any of the pillars of dharma, actually they are becoming more and more slave of their senses. Eventually, to a degree where you give up your freedom entirely, you become such a slave of your senses, which whatever your sense says, you do it. So all the freedom movements today, all the movements of liberation which are being discussed, highlighted, projected, taught in the movies, schools, education, whatnot, is actually meant to make you a bigger slave. Because once you become slave of your mind and senses, it's very easy for me to tempt you. Yes or no? For example, if you become a slave of or addicted, slave means addicted to smoke, it's very easy for me to get work done with you by offering a higher quality of smoke. You'll be very easily willing to buy that. So today's whole world is like that, is functioning on that basis. Why so much young man is getting addicted to adult movies, pornography and all that? The whole consciousness has been hijacked by such a thing. So much abundance, these kind of contents are available, and I believe is available in Indian media also now, just because to make a person a slave of their senses, where they cannot think what is right and wrong for themselves. They have to be taught. Everyone gets governed by whatever media speaks. That's the reason today we have left wing and right wing. Yes or no? The whole world is divided into left wing and right wing. I believe prior to a few years before, none of you would have heard about right wing and left wing in India. Left wing and right wing was a popular statement in America. where the whole nation is divided in left and right wing, where there are two political parties. So this is what happens. Discussion is long. But nonetheless, we are starting a dedicated youth series. What is it called as? Men come from Mars, women come from Venus. So, that's up on the website. So you can go ahead. There are 9 topics, interesting topics. So I would encourage all the youth to attend it. I personally consider it's very, very important. There are some very interesting discussions. All right, Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, there is a quick question from Dimple. She has asked this question yesterday also. The question is, what is the difference between Lord incarnation and expansion? Dimple,
Hare
you know,
Krishna. I didn't had a chance to take a look at it. I guess I said yesterday also, right? Incarnation, expansion. I'll have to really look into the Sanskrit word of it to be able to explain to you. Okay, Dimple, I remember they're probably from our, what is that? Kuwait congregation?
Yes, Prabhuji.
I remember the daughter attending the last year Ramayana series, correct?
Yes, Prabhuji.
I remember the father also. He was also
Hare
sitting
Krishna,
along
thank
with you. Okay. I'll get back to you, both of you. In case if you have my WhatsApp, please ping me. I didn't get a
I got
time, but
that.
I'll definitely look at it tomorrow. And
Okay.
I want to refer to the Sanskrit word first to be able to look at the answer. All right, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, there is a question from YouTube. Hariji is asking, and a similar question have also been asked here in Zoom, that if now in the current state we are not able to take Lord's name with the pure devotion and dedication, then how it is possible to take during the time of death? And similarly, the question is like, sometimes like in the current COVID scenario, people are totally unconscious. So how they'll be able to remember Lord?
Well, let's talk about the first question right now. What is Krishna telling you to do? Anusmara and Abhyasa. Why don't you worry about your job profile? This is another problem with the mind of a human being. Too much worried. Doesn't focus on what I have to do, always worried about what others have to do. What Krishna tells you to do? Chant. And through that, Anusmara and chant every day. Kindly take care of your job profile. If you take care of job profile, Krishna promises he'll take care of his job profile to take you back to Godhead. Okay. Now, regarding the situation of those who are in COVID, who have, in other words, coma, yeah, that's a difficult situation, but still somebody who has followed the instruction of the Lord, Anusmara and Abhyasa, Krishna can do anything. Krishna can force through that state of coma also and can make you remember. And even for that, it doesn't matter, if you remember or not remember, it is up to Krishna. Krishna created a system for us, how to take, how the system of transmigration. If Krishna is pleased by a living entity, Krishna can take him nonetheless. See, for the king who has created the rule, just like you have a traffic signals, right? But when the Prime Minister car comes, all the traffic signals are made non-functional. Yes or no? The rules which apply for us does not apply for the Lord. So Lord want to bypass the rule and take you from the coma state, take you from the coma state. भाई कुछ उनको भी तो अपनी prowess दिखाने दो. सब कुछ हम ही करेंगे. So that's how everything possible. All right, so it's almost close to 8:26. We can take last 1 or 2 questions. There anything?
Ji, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, there is one question by Dheeraj Shetty ji. Very interesting question. When we chant, basically we are requesting Lord to take us under himself and allow us to do some devotional service. So now, how much should be the weightage on chanting and how much should be the weightage on devotional service?
Your chanting is the topmost devotional service. It is not separate from devotional service. Chanting should be 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra for those who have become steady on the path of spiritual life and are serious about spiritual life. If you're in the beginning stage, you can start from 2 rounds to 4 rounds and gradually, but most importantly, whatever number of rounds you chant, you should be in the association of Vaishnavas and devotees. And it's good if you have some mentor to whom you can, take a personal guidance on how to progress. In spiritual forums, we call as mentors or counselor, whatever you want to call it, spiritual mentor, to help us move forward. Whatever challenges we come across in our day-to-day practice can be resolved in that relationship. So that is what it is. It's a most important spiritual activity which ought to be done. And along with that, we should follow the other part of a spiritual activity like offering bhoga to the Lord and honoring it as Krishna Prasadam, reading and hearing of wisdom literatures. Okay.
Ji, Prabhuji. I can see last hand from Mahesh Jagtapji. Mahesh Jagtapji, could you please switch on your video? And meanwhile, there was a connected question on the 16 rounds only, and the question was who, why, and how to decide on practice of 16 rounds. Like who has decided, why, and how?
Oh, very nice question. Actually, in scriptures, it is said to be able to stay or to be able to cultivate sattva guna or maintain sattva guna, we should be chanting 25,000 names of the Lord every day. Now, who is this person who has asked this question? Is he around?
Shubham Dubeji. Yes, he should be. Shubham Dubeji.
Shivam, if you are here around, you take out a smartphone, do a quick calculation. 16 rounds, which means one round has 108 times chanting of Hare Krishna, multiply by 16. Every chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra has 16 names of the Lord. Multiply by 16. Can you tell us what is the number that comes?
27,600.
Yeah, it comes approximately 27,000 names of the Lord. That is the logic behind chanting the minimum 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. With that, we are almost close to the session. Jagtapji, are you there to ask a question? I'm unable to see. Yeah, he is. You may ask a question. You are allowed to unmute, although we are unable to see.
Yeah, here is no electricity now. That's why I'm not.
No problem, Jagtapji, go ahead.
प्रभु जी हमारा अगला बर्थ जो है वो माइंड बेस्ड क्यों है, इंटेलिजेंस बेस्ड क्यों नहीं?
No, your question is not clear. Voice is breaking.
Hare
प्रभु
Krishna.
जी हमारा अगला बर्थ जो
Oh, आपका अगला बर्थ
Can I
माइंड
talk?
बेस्ड क्यों है, इंटेलिजेंस बेस्ड क्यों है? Actually, it depends on
yeah.
thoughts. It depends on thoughts, what we are thinking. So the function of mind is thinking, willing, and feeling. You know, so it's not the function of intelligence. Intelligence function is to discriminate, but the function of mind, the activities of the mind includes thinking, feeling, and willing. So thoughts, the mind is a cluster of thoughts and experiences. Therefore, mind is involved into it. All right.
Thank you.
However, intelligence is also included into it because intelligence is higher than the mind. So actually the decision maker is the intelligence. So you have to engage your mind in the right kind of activities through the use of intelligence. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Okay.
all,
Thank you.
everyone.
Prabhuji, there is one special request, one special question has come. So can we take that last question and we
Yeah,
can?
please. Quick.
Yeah. So Prabhuji, the question is, the question was from the YouTube, but due to word limit, she couldn't put it on the YouTube. She has personally felt the presence of God at different stage of her life post her father starting his eternal journey. Nevertheless, there are so many instances in her life I have felt lonely, although I start my day with Vishnu chanting. Is there something that Sri Krishna wants me to change in terms of lifestyle? Why am I experiencing loneliness, insecurity?
Every living entity in this world undergoes loneliness. And the reason of loneliness is disconnection from our spiritual relationship with the Lord. Loneliness, insecurity are an indication of our disconnection from the Lord. And to overcome that disconnection, we have to take to the process of spiritual life to connect with the Lord. And that is what it is. Now, if you look at it, the kind of situation you're undergoing is what every one of us are undergoing. That's the reason people are more and more unhappy today. Even we may have hundreds and thousands of online friends, people are still lonely because our heart is hankering, our soul is hankering for love and affection, which can only come in relationship with the Supreme Lord. So I would say you are fortunate enough to understand your situation. Now here is the solution for you. Chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, read Bhagavad Gita, through which you will get more wisdom, and gradually you will experience this loneliness has been taken off. The insecurity is gone because now you'll begin to experience the merciful hand of the Lord in your life. All right.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. With this, we have almost covered all questions from the YouTube as well as Zoom. And we are very grateful that you have let out your time and share the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita chapter 8 specifically to all of us.
So before we conclude with, once in a while, I say if everyone can switch on their cameras, so at least I get to see who all are the audience to whom I'm speaking at least. Who all are continuing to come along. Okay, good to see recurring students. Okay, half of you could switch on, maybe others could not. Fine, thank you. Glad to meet all of you once again. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
So much, Prabhuji. Thanks a lot to all our YouTube audience as well as our Zoom audience for attending today's session. And we look forward to have all of you for tomorrow's session, Chapter 9, Episode 9, Bhakti Yoga, which is going to be based on the Chapter 9 of Bhagavad Gita, the ultimate knowledge or the ultimate bliss of knowledge will be shared by Prabhuji tomorrow. And we request all of you to take care of yourself and your